Hello, and welcome to Havoc Wargaming, dedicated to bringing you the uncommon. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Ron, and today we're going to do a review of several different MDF brownstone buildings. So let's get started. Some time ago, I did a review of MDF Wild West buildings, and I stated that I was going to follow through with some urban buildings, mostly brownstones, and probably World War II buildings. And I kind of forgot about that. So we're going to come back and talk about that right now. And talk about buildings useful for building a table set in a more urban environment, particularly an American urban environment. Most of these buildings, most of the gaming that I do using these buildings is set in the 1920s or 30s. So gangster games like Mad Dogs with Guns, pulp games like Pulp Alley. If they're taking place in city environments, these brownstone buildings are an excellent way to go to bring that urban idea to life. And a lot of different companies do buildings in this line. So we're going to talk about a few of the ones that I've used and what I like or don't like about them. It is mostly MDF. I do talk about, for a small amount, one 3D printed building. And that's because I'm not that familiar with the 3D printed building. I don't have any difficulty with 3D printed buildings. I just don't have a 3D printer. Any buildings that have more texture to them are often better done in 3D printing than they are done in MDF. But I think brownstones are something that MDF does all right. The advantage, of course, with 3D printing is not only that it does more in-depth 3D imaging, but some of these buildings, at least some of the fantasy ones I've seen, have a full interior. And by that, I don't just mean walls and structure, but sometimes even bits of furniture and stoves and various detail parts too. And as we start getting into small-scale skirmish games, particularly the kind of games that are done in these city environments, you start finding yourself needing interior details. So I think that's going to be a real improvement down the line. But as I mentioned, I don't have a large number of them, so this is going to be dealing mostly with a number of different producers of MDF products. So let's get started. So what we have here is a line of a few of the buildings we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to cross over and show you some more detail of a few of them to give you an idea what you can expect from some of these models. I'm going to start on the far left with the obvious brownstone models. These two on the very end are the ones I want to start with. Those are made by a company called Northern Light Terrain. As you can see, a pretty good match with the Sarisa buildings, which is what these next three are. They come into different pieces. I think there's spare tops made for them so you can add to their heights. I'm pretty sure I have a couple. I bought a bundle. They make a bundle, which was $110 Canadian, or is now. I don't remember. That's what I paid. But that comes with 5 of the buildings. These are passable. They work, like I say, well with the Sarisa. There's a few different designs. They are different from the designs of the Sarisa buildings, so that's nice. It helps break up your city. They're less expensive, and part of the way they make them less expensive is they leave the detail off on the sides, the rear, and the pavement in front. The sidewalk is pretty much just blank. I'll bring in this other one here to give you an idea too. So it's the same thing. You'll see no detailing on the side. Plenty of detailing on the front. It's a little chunky, but it works all right. It helps fill your town and give you a little bit more variety, and I think that's a useful thing. A little chunky, heavy, as is typical with North American MDF. It's 3mm MDF. It's a little chunkier than some of the British things, but that helps make it more durable, and I think they work fine in addition. I don't think they're that great on their own. I find that the lack of detail bothers me less in practice than I thought it was going to. This is a typical Sarisa one. Again, these buildings are sold individually, but Sarisa also does a bundle. Their bundle is right now 102, well actually it's on sale right now, but it's regularly 102 pounds. It's a few more buildings. I think it was 6 buildings, one more building than the other set came with. And it definitely came with a couple of extensions to change its height, give it more options you can do with it. Again, they come apart, which is kind of nice. A couple of them have these awnings on them. Those were kind of a bother to paint, but they are a really nice addition, I think. I have 2 of them came with those. and that helps break up the set. Now again, these are typical Sarissa, so the slightly thinner MDF, and then their gray board or sort of card stock detailing on it. Very nice models, and the majority of my brownstone buildings are that. You'll notice I have a number of labels and signs on these. Those come from various model railroad companies, mostly. Some of them are decals, some of them are just cut out and glued on paper. These are both Sarissa. You can see they have the terrain on the sidewalk as well. So the Sarissa line is a very good, very strong line. And again, it has a nice bundle. Those bundles are a great way to get started in doing cityscapes if you don't already have things. Because for about 100 pounds or $100 on the other company, the Canadian shipping right now is really high, but so is British shipping. Sarissa's got a really good price on their shipping. But of course, 102 pounds is a good deal more than 110 Canadian. The only problem I have with Sarissa is this. I think it's their apartment is what they call it. Can't remember. Impressive looking building, looks good on the table, but you might notice that it doesn't line up really well with the floors and the scale. I think Sarissa often runs a little small. So let's see, that's about 2 inches for the floor, and it's about 2.5 on this building. And these are the same line made by the same company. But these ones are older. The more blockish ones you'll see, I think they're older, but there's a line of those. They're all these big blockish buildings, a little bit less fancy than the brownstones, and they seem to tend to lean a little bit towards that smaller size. So that's something to think about. It doesn't bother me that much. I usually put that building off on the fringe a little bit further away from some of the others, but it is a disappointment, which is a shame. It's a great looking building on its own right. Another building that I've had some challenges with, which is also Sarissa, is the building right next to it. I actually purchased this for my London. It's sold from their steampunk, their Victorian London line. It's a good reminder of how you can mix and match some of the different lines and make them work. Now, I had a lot of trouble with this kit, and it hasn't held up well. Some of my parts didn't fit well. I don't know if that was a distortion in them. I had to cut and file tabs to make it worse. And now the quality of it, it's become almost cardboard. But I don't know if that's Sarissa's fault or mine. I have some humidity issues in the room that I store this stuff in, and it's becoming a habit of mine now, and I think in any of my newer MDF to paint interior and exterior. Frankly, a lot of these games start using interiors anyway, so finishing interiors is becoming more important to me. But I also think painting both sides of the MDF. MDF is very susceptible to moisture issues. It can, you'll notice that when you're painting how much it sucks up paint, but it's also taking moisture out of the air that way, and that's not good for the wood in the long run, and it can warp and things like that. And painting both sides probably would have helped prevent some of that. I've got some details on the top of these as well, you'll notice. The fireplaces or chimneys like this one here. That's just a box of chimneys from a model railroading company. Some of those are plastic, and I have some that are a resin or a plaster. Water tower, I believe, is an Ainsty. I have two, which is why I'm confused. Pretty sure that's the Ainsty one, which is the one I prefer, which is mostly resin. I also have this one here, but this one is a combination of lead and resin. And the all resin one was certainly easier to use. It was broken when it arrived to me, but I managed to fix it. One of the legs was broken. Roofing details are really helpful. You're going to see these buildings mostly from their roofs, and also it gives the possibility of things to hide behind and stuff such as that. So now we're going to leave those two manufacturers, and the next one I think I'd like to talk about is Multiverse. I don't have a whole lot of Multiverse, but what I do have is this pawn shop here on the end. That model was a lot of trouble. I think it looks all right in the end, but originally it said pawn shop here with MDF letters that were really hard to remove from their sprues, and they broke. There should be window bars here. Those were cardstock, and mine just didn't hold up well. That's not the building's fault. That's my fault. It took a while for me to get to working on it, and they've been kind of damaged. I also do this thing with the doors that I don't really like, but it's not a big issue, is they build them on these little stands. That's how they deal with opening and closing of doors. If I was doing this building over again, and I may still just do it, it's just glue it in. Another building I have, is this one here. This is actually sold as being a near future or maybe a Batman newsstand. And the only things that really dated, I would argue, is some of the fonts, like the way it says newsstand on it. Mine has become more dated. I'm bringing it out to show it to you because it happens to be here. And I usually use this stuff that I've laid out here for American gangster games in the 1920s or 30s. But this I did up and bought for doing London, 1970s London. So the modern lettering didn't bother me a whole lot. In fact, the ads on here all come from advertisements from England in the 70s. So I've set this up pretty much to be specifically 70s, and I decided the kind of modern looking logos fit. This is multiverse. I'm very happy with this. Doing more modern stuff, they do some great things on their line. They have a few more brownstones. I've never purchased them. I don't know what quality they're like, but I'm expecting that they're okay. They probably still have these doors. I also have their diner, and that has those same doors that this piece has. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if their brownstones have them. But otherwise, they look like perfectly usable brownstones. I just don't have any here, I'm afraid, to show you. This is my more period American newsstand. This is the one I use for gangster games. This is a 3D print from a company that makes model railroad supplies, and I don't remember the name offhand. So what I'll do is include it in the lower third title down below, right down here. The nice thing about this company is because it is 3D printing, and he is a model railroad company, he makes it available in several different scales. I got the one that is designed for S scale for 156 for 28 millimeter. That's somewhat debatable, as some of you will know. My cars are almost all 143s, which is practically O scale, because the figures are actually bulkier and bigger. These are my basic, more brownstone buildings for doing 1930s or 40s or any eastern United States city, or for that matter, even parts of LA downtown in California you could pull off with this. And I'm going to show you some of the other more specific buildings that I have. These are, we're going to start again from the left going to the right. A foreground on the far side of one of their shotgun houses, 2 war bases, an Empires of War, and a TT Combat. So let's go ahead and talk about these individually. The first one I want to bring up is going to be the foreground. There's 3 of these shotgun houses, a very common housing style in many parts of the United States in the period, called that because of their long, skinny shape. These, like any foreground, these are a little expensive. You can sometimes find them on sale. I did. They have full interiors, and I mean full finished interiors. These are, of course, pre-painted. They have working doors. Nice model. So they're more expensive, but they're more expensive because they're pre-painted and have the double thickness. And like I say, there's 3 of those. I have all of them. They have a number of other buildings that are designed for the Gangster's Way game. And all of their buildings are pretty nice. I don't think they do the brownstones so much, but they do more of these like kind of standalone buildings like these houses and garage and stuff like that. So very nice work. Now, the war bases is kind of a peculiar choice. I think they work, but they're not really designed even to be U.S. models. So this, for instance, is their police house. Bought these actually for VBCW, and that's the line that they're made for. The roofs come off, the interiors aren't finished. Some of these buildings are perfectly usable, though, alongside of American 30s things. Police station probably would have been more common on the sign for this than police house. But other than that, and that's an easy fix if it really bothered you. I don't know why I never bothered to glue the door in on this. I need to do that at some point. This, like the other one, instead of making it come into 2 pieces like the Sarissa buildings I was showing you do, the floor just comes out. That's a problem if you're on the second, if you have people on the second floor and on the first at the same time. Both of these models also have war bases tile roofs, which were extra work I did on. That didn't come with it. Again, I think this building is usable. Though bank chambers is not a very common American term or expression or title. But again, I think that building is usable, and you could paint the sign entirely different and make it a number of different things. I am a big fan of war bases, even though they don't really fit the period that we're talking about here so much, like I just mentioned, those 2 buildings. Oh, I should also mention they do a great little gas station. I think they sell as a garage. but it's able to be made into several different things. And I didn't bring mine, but I have two of those actually. I have one done up as a World War II French gas station, and I have one done up for 1930s. This is supposed to be a Norman factory or warehouse. This is Empires of War. Again, this is a pre-painted company, Empires of War. Again, it is not specific to this. It's supposed to be, like I said, Normandy. But there's not much, I think, that keeps it specific to that. It has a somewhat complete interior. It is painted a different color, at least, and has interior walls. And this has been a very wise purchase, I think. The roof doesn't fit as much as I would prefer. These are both done the exact same size on both sides, which doesn't work when they meet in the middle. But, you know, a file could fix it if it bothered me that much. That's a nice, convenient building that can be used for numerous of different things, particularly to create an industrial area. Now we're going to go to TT Combat. This is a great example of stepping a little outside the expectations. This building is actually sold in their like Wild West line, which I don't think it works well for at all. It's got some etching details issues on it, which are a little awkward for this period because it is really kind of cyberpunky, and the interior stairs are way bulky and out of proper dimension with the rest of the building. But it was relatively inexpensive. Nice way to get started on industrial buildings, which are a little hard to find in this period and a little expensive, as you might imagine, because of their size. Another TT Combat building, in many ways similar to the one I just said, but more useful. This is an Art Deco piece, so it does fit very well with the structures and the period that we're talking about. Mine needs a little work. You'll notice just from what I just showed you, or you may have just seen that I just taped this door back in. I've left the main door taped on so that I can either leave it closed or I can pull it off when I want it off as an open door. This is the part I was going to talk about. This building separates here, and I had left it that way so that I could store it more easily. But it has caused a structural weakness problem, and I don't think it was actually meant to be left that way. I don't want to give it a bad review from that. I think that's my fault, and it's an easy fix. Didn't fit horribly well together, but it does, you can get it to fit. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and glue it together and let it become permanently affixed. I'll leave the roof so it can come off. I think it was probably really just cut this way for their shipping purposes to fit into their packaging and not meant to be left that way. I want to show you this wall as well. This is the end wall of it. These doors are also taped on, so I can remove them. I've one has a little catwalk. It's a nice structure. There's no doors on the back section of it. That is a really nice piece, I think. Good size structure, and really goes a long way toward looking like what it is supposed to be. I almost forgot to talk about one of the buildings I really wanted to mention. One of my favorites here, which is the Antonicitis Workshop. This is my newest discovery. Is this company here. This one, unfortunately, is only primed. I just started to paint it. This is the Bullock's Boutique, but they do a number of structures. Their prices are good. They're between $23 and $45. And the $45 one is for a huge structure that is the building that holds the pub from the movie Shaun of the Dead. More complete interiors than the other models have. Very well put together. It was a combination of MDF and gray board. There is some issues with my assembly here in the front, but this is my fault, not the model's fault. I really should have clamped those. Nice pieces. I'm going to get some more of theirs for sure. I'm very, very pleased with their line. Looks a little modernish maybe, but again, they're making it mostly for zombie games and superhero games. But it fits in well with the other models, and stores like that are uncommon right now. Models out there, so I'm very pleased about that. So there you have it, some of the manufacturers that I enjoy. Sarisa clearly is one that I've used quite a deal of, but there's a number of different products out there. I'm really looking forward to getting some more by, I can never know how to say their name, Antonicitis Workshops. I'm really impressed with the one building I have of theirs. I want to get some more, and the price range is really good on those. So I'm looking forward to adding those and suggest them as well. So I mentioned earlier that I use these buildings primarily for 1920s and 30s games, for period games, but a lot of them are made and very useful for doing modern zombie games or post-apocalyptic games in an urban environment, superhero games. And in fact, I'm working right now on a project which is Geezers. Geezers is 1970s detectives and police, but there's a variation of that called Vice Palms to introduce it into America. And I'm working on a 1970s big city American detective game, and I'll be using some of these buildings for that too. All it takes to change the feel of these buildings is a variation of street scatter, possibly some of the signs and certainly some of the posters if you put posters up. But even those aren't necessarily that big of an issue in many cases. I would argue the biggest change is the vehicles you put out on the road and some of the accessories. Various things like that help set the time period. The cars probably go the furthest route. A lot of flexibility, more than may be evident immediately. If you have any thoughts about some of these products I mentioned or other products along these lines you would like to share with people, I hope you'll do that in the comments down below. If you've enjoyed the video, I hope you'll hit like. And if you'd like to continue to receive further notifications for videos like this one that'll help you determine how to better spend your time or your money in your wargaming hobby, then please hit subscribe and ring our notification bell. Till next time, cheers.